Thank you. Thank you very much, John. Thank you to everyone at the Paris American Club for inviting us to present our upcoming publication. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here, and I'm very delighted to share our upcoming volume, which is entitled ReFocus, the Films of Michel Gondry, and it is published by Edinburgh University Press, September 2020. And my name is Marcelline Block. I'm one of the book's editors, along with Jennifer Kirby and contributor Monique Taylor, who has a wonderful chapter in the volume. So this is the cover of the book. How many of you are familiar with Michel Gondry's films? Just out of curiosity, how many of you have seen a Gondry film? Anybody?
Yes. Non, pas moi.
Which one have you seen?
Eternal, was it Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind?
Yes, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
What did you think of it? Did you enjoy it?
Oh yeah, I really enjoyed it. That was beautiful.
Oh, great. What did you like the most about it? Or what did you enjoy? Just
I don't know, just the presentation, the problem that they presented, and it made you kind of rethink the mind a bit.
oh, great.
I don't have to explain it.
Yeah, great. No, exactly. So again, this is the cover of our volume. The cover of the volume is an image from a film entitled Be Kind, Rewind. Has anyone seen it, or is anyone familiar with it? Be Kind, Rewind? Or does anybody know what that phrase means, or the significance of the phrase Be Kind, Rewind?
It's the blockbuster phrase, no?
Exactly. So it comes from when films used to be on VHS on tape. When you borrowed it from Blockbuster or any kind of video store, you had to rewind it when you returned it to the store. So this is a Gondry film kind of playing with that concept of rewinding or remaking films. And the actors featured are comedian Jack Black and actor Mos Def, also known as Yassine Bey. And our book is published by a series called ReFocus, the International Directors Series, which aims to produce new critical volumes from an interdisciplinary perspective, which bring influential yet often neglected international directors to the attention of a new audience of scholars as well as students in film studies. And we were drawn to Gondry because his works are very unique. They're whimsical in terms of visual style and themes, as well as very diverse. They are diverse as far as language. He works in both French and English, although probably his most well-known films, in fact, are in English, such as Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. But he has films in French as well as in Japanese. He has a short film called Interior Design, which is part of the Omnibus Tokyo. And it's diverse in genre, from personal short films to documentaries to iconic films to action films such as the Green Hornet. And it's diverse in terms of, he also has music videos, advertisements, and he's directed a number of television episodes of the Showtime television show Kidding. I don't know if anyone's seen Kidding, which was on recently from 2018 to 2020, as well as Flight of the Conchords, which is of New Zealand. So, and here we have, so that's, and our editor Jennifer hails from New Zealand, our co-editor Jennifer hails from New Zealand. And Gondry he was born in Versailles. He's a screenwriter, a director, and producer, and best known for his English language films, such as the mind-bending drama Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which he directed, and he actually received the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. And here are some of the images from Eternal Sunshine, including the film's poster, some of its iconic images, and this is Gondry. So I thought we could take a brief glimpse at some of Gondry's, a brief clip at some of his style, his aesthetic, what kind of characterizes his filmography, his oeuvre. I thought this might be...
Marcelline, we don't have image on screen. We've only still got the PowerPoint.
So that gives you an idea of Gondry's aesthetic and, oh.
Michel Gondry is a French filmmaker with a penchant for creating surrealistic scenes in his movies. You may never have seen any of his films, but there's a good chance you've seen his unusual music videos. If I were to describe the filmmaking style of Michel Gondry, I'd use the words...
Excuse me, I'm sorry about that. Pardon me. And so, although Gondry is an acclaimed auteur and an Oscar-winning screenwriter for Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and he has received extensive critical praise for his use of handcrafted effects in his multifaceted filmography, as well as much scholarly interest in his individual cinematic works, in particular Eternal Sunshine. An edited book collection devoted entirely to Gondry has not yet been published, and this is where our edited volume, ReFocus, the films of Michel Gondry, seeks to fill this crucial gap in film and media studies. And we feature a range of original critical studies and an in-depth overview of Gondry's career and work by drawing connections between his films, televisual works, and music videos by approaching his oeuvre from multiple interdisciplinary perspectives. And again, Gondry has directed numerous innovative, groundbreaking films, television shows, documentaries in French and English. And I'm not sure if anybody has seen any of the films listed here. The films or the television productions. In fact, in 2018, Gondry made his first extended foray into the world of television, and he serves as the executive producer and director of numerous episodes of the first 2 seasons of the half-hour Showtime comedy series Kidding, starring Jim Carrey, who previously starred in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And in Kidding, Carrey plays Jeff, aka Mr. Pickles, the host of a successful children's puppet television show, which he has developed with his father, who produces the show, and his sister, who designs and makes the puppets. And the show reunites Gondry with his star of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And as the chapter in our volume by Lisa DeTora entitled Death and Pickles, Thinking Through Gondry's Neighborhood explains, it returns Gondry to his perennial themes of the instability of identity and the difficulty of separating real life from imagination. And Jeff, or Mr. Pickles, articulates his thoughts and processes his emotions through the gleefully surreal puppet show and even imagines people in his life as puppets. And surreal is often a term that is applied to Gondry's works, to his filmography. It's often called surreal. And Microbe and Gasoline, or Microbe et Gasoil, in this film, which is the film that Jennifer Kirby and I wrote about in our volume, this film heavily references the American road movie, although it's a French language film. And Gondry displays many marks of European art filmmaking, such as the self-referential relationship to cinema and the creative approach to temporal and spatial organization. These marks unite both his French and his English language films. And this film heavily refers to or references the American road movie. And this film is his most recent feature film. It's a picaresque narrative. And it draws from the conventions of the road movie through its focus on social outsiders, lighthearted depictions of run-ins with the police, and emphasis on male bonding. The film also provides a commentary on the notion and definition of the concept of home in France, as the film follows two teenage boys taking a 250-mile-long journey through France in a makeshift house on wheels, linking a coming-of-age narrative to a growing awareness of the complexities and divisions within France. And in this film, Gondry depicts his trademark childhood play and whimsy, which has also been seen, for instance, in Kidding, among his other productions, alongside a sobering adult realization of the injustices that exist in the world. And representing another form of border crossing, the film blends conventions from the American road movie with the French road movie's potential for what one critic has called elaborating flexible, transnational, and multicultural alternatives to a monolithic version of France. And it thus serves to reinforce Gondry's status as an outsider, as an auteur, whose work is frequently transnational in character, and recalling another critic's claim that Gondry is the spiritual heir, not only to Jean Cocteau and Georges Méliès, but also Walt Disney and Steven Spielberg. And here you can see a little bit more about Gondry's works, which vary greatly in length, budget, and scale, and ranging from high concept features to short films, such as the surreal short movie in the omnibus film Tokyo, to his personal documentary about his aunt, Suzette, who was a school teacher. And here's just some of the films and documentaries that Gondry directed in English and in French. And is anyone familiar with any of them? If you see them listed here, other than we've spoken about Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and Monique Taylor, our contributor, will be speaking about Dave Chappelle's Block Party, and Jennifer Kirby about the Green Hornet. And along with films and television shows that Gondry has written and directed, he has also created some of the most influential music videos and advertisements in the history of these media, such as ads for Levi's, jeans, Smirnoff vodka, really big companies, really major companies, Air France, Motorola, the Las Vegas resorts. And he's actually directed about 100 or so music videos starting from the 1980s, and he's still directing them today through 2020. So some of the biggest names, biggest performers, artists, groups, Paul McCartney, the Rolling Stones, Radiohead, Kanye West, the White Stripes, Kylie Minogue, just many, many groups and performers that he's directed music videos for. And here, IndieWire notes that Gondry has inspired a generation of filmmakers. His films are eccentric, they're often lo-fi visuals, they're inventive. They have made him into one of the most distinctive filmmakers working today. And again, we use a lot of times the term surreal, dreamlike, when discussing his aesthetic, his narratives. And this is his first film, his first feature, Human Nature. And IndieWire also named Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind as the #1 screenplay of the 21st century, the best American screenplay of the 21st century, according to IndieWire. And again, despite his influence and his impact, an edited book collection devoted entirely to him and his works has not yet been published, and we seek to fill this gap. We offer in-depth overview of his career, drawing connections between his films, televisual works, and music videos by approaching his oeuvre from interdisciplinary perspectives. And here his film Mood Indigo, has anyone seen Mood Indigo? It's based on Boris Vian, L'écume des jours by Boris Vian. And here we offer a comprehensive study of this significant and influential figure. We treat his French and English language films and music videos. And we frame Gondry as a transnational France and the United States, an auteur whose work provides insight into French, European, and American cinematic and cultural identity. And we explore a range of his works and significant themes such as surrealism, adaptation, memory, dreams, play, and African-American identity. And we believe the book will have appeal to a broad range of readers interested in the various media in which Gondry has worked and in contemporary postmodern French and American cinema. And our overall argument is that Gondry is emblematic of transnational, transcultural auteur filmmaking, and he has French funding even in some of his English language works, crossing the aesthetic and cultural borders between national film industries and between art and popular cinema and between media. And as you can see, in some of his works, he actually draws the animation himself, such as Is the Man Who Is Tall Happy with Noam Chomsky, his animated, hand-drawn animated documentary about public intellectual philosopher from MIT, American public intellectual and philosopher Noam Chomsky, and political activist. And I believe Jennifer will be now speaking.
Sorry, just a moment. I'll just get up to the slide we're up to. Hopefully you can see my screen. I'm sorry if it's a little bit loud where I am with background noise in a very Kiwi trend. Most people in New Zealand seem to be using lockdown to do DIY projects on their house, so my neighbour is banging away with great aplomb at his fence. Okay. So one of the, as Marcelline mentioned, Michel Gondry's works are very, very diverse. And so one of the great advantages from that was that we were able to get a number of diverse contributors from different parts of the world who approached his works with from very different perspectives. So we've got some theorists that look at his works from narrative and literary theory, especially on Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which is, as Marcelline mentioned, regarded as one of the best American screenplays of the 21st century. So we've got some theorists looking at that. We've also got a lot of theorists approaching his aesthetic from a kind of art perspective, especially looking at ideas around handcrafts, around DIY, and around how this very handcrafted aesthetic can be used to represent dreams and the logic of fantasy. We also have obviously analysis of how the films kind of intersect with both French and American traditions. So Marcelline mentioned our chapter about Micro Begassois, which is about uses some of the American road movie, but is also very much about this idea of kind of what home means in France, mainly through the metaphor of this sort of little house that these two boys make with a shed on wheels to travel through France. We've got a chapter by Sian Mitchell from Australia about Gondry's films and the legacy of John Vigo and the idea of l'amour fou, of kind of a mad love that transforms time and space. So we've sort of approached from a number of these different perspectives: film history, narrative, art, and in particular for the section of Gondry in and on America, we became quite interested in the way that he depicts personal, collective, and community memory. And this is something that Monique's going to talk about in her fantastic or talks about in her fantastic chapter for our book. So the film that we have on the cover, Be Kind, Rewind, which I think Marcelline mentioned earlier, is very concerned with this idea of personal and community memory. So it follows a story where these two kind of hapless video store employees, they're video store employees at kind of the end of video stores, and just as DVD is taking over, or at the end of VHS, so they kind of accidentally wipe all of the tapes. And so before their boss comes back, they have to try and recreate all the films. So they sort of make DIY versions with what's at hand. So cellophane versions of Ghostbusters and things like that. Then they get kind of a copyright claim and are told to cease and desist in no uncertain terms. And so what they decide to do is to instead get the whole community together to make a film about the jazz musician Fats Waller, who the whole community erroneously believes comes from this community, even though he doesn't. So even though it's kind of an inauthentic memory, it actually gets everyone together and produces the sense of community. So it's kind of questioning the relationship between kind of authenticity and memory here, and stating that kind of that memory doesn't have to be strictly historical. So in her chapter entitled Memory a la Americana, Yuyun Sai offers a comparative analysis of Eternal Sunshine, which I think some of you have mentioned, which is sort of about personal memory erasure, and Be Kind, Rewind. And she argues that in the latter film, quote, the town residents gather to invent their cultural icon, jazz musician Fats Waller, and construct their own collective memory from the past in another fabrication. Although Gondry adapts the time loop to both films about memory, his interest has evolved from personal memory and individual memory in Eternal Sunshine to community sentiment and collective memory and Be Kind, Rewind. So he's very interested in this idea of kind of personal psychology, but also the psychology of a society and how memory and storytelling can kind of sustain this. So again, as Marcelline alluded to, we have this kind of idea that although Gondry's works are very diverse, that we can see some of the same preoccupations going across the English and French language films, hence why he's such a transnational, transcultural filmmaker. So for example, I'll just speak very briefly about a chapter that I contributed to the volume on the Green Hornet. I don't know if anyone saw the Green Hornet. It is a much kind of, I wouldn't say despised, but a quite disparaged film. It's a superhero film starring Seth Rogen, who plays a kind of inept playboy who's suddenly thrown into a role taking over his father's newspaper after his father passes away. It got really bad reviews, partly because it's quite unusual for a superhero film. And Gondry was kind of perceived to be an odd or surprising choice as a director for this film. But in my chapter on the Green Hornet, I find a strong sense of play and self-reflexivity in the film, which we can link back to some of his other works, which I argue works to deconstruct the American superhero movie. So although the film kind of centers on this protagonist who's kind of useless at being a superhero, he's a rich playboy portrayed by Seth Rogen, the film kind of playfully spoofs the conventions of the superhero film to emphasize his incompetence. So, for example, his sidekick, Kato, is played by Jay Chow. While Kato is designing his weapons, we see Britt kind of just doodling on a magazine, which is a bit of a riff on the idea that you might see in films like Spider-Man, where there's this great moment where the hero comes up with his suit. And it also kind of plays with the aesthetics of superhero films because it forgoes the digital look, and instead everything looks as if it's being kind of created with toys and paper. So emphasizing childhood play as if it's kind of a kid playing at being a superhero in the aesthetic as well. So I don't want to talk for too long because we want Monique to have a chance to explore, to share about her wonderful chapter. But just to reinforce that the films about and or set in the United States tend to explore some of the common themes from the French films, but they also offer this kind of outsider's perspective or an encounter from a European perspective on America, ideas about American popular culture, and also kind of America as a construct and how communities are produced and sustained in America. So Monique Taylor has written a really valuable analysis of a film called Dave Chappelle's Block Party. Hopefully people are aware of Dave Chappelle, American comedian, Chappelle's Show, of course. Been sort of in the news recently-ish for his last controversial Netflix special. It's also won a number of quite prestigious prizes for comedy. So Monique Taylor addresses this film, which is a kind of a documentary come concert film that Gondry made about a block party that Dave Chappelle hosted. And she argues that Gondry plays the role of outsider looking in as both a participant and an observer of aspects of American cultural conversations on memory, identity, and language. So Monique Taylor is a renowned author and commentator on food, film, and popular culture, as well as on gentrification, racial identities, and history in Harlem. She is the author of the 2002 book Harlem Between Heaven and Hell, published by University of Minnesota Press. She holds a PhD and MA in sociology from Harvard University and is a recipient of a Graves Award for Excellence in Teaching from the American Council of Learned Societies. She's currently based as the campus dean and executive director at the Abu Dhabi campus of the New York Institute of Technology. And she's going to talk to us now briefly about her contribution to the book, which is one of the contributions that we value highly because it again kind of addresses Gondry in this transnational space, in the space of community and memory. So I will stop sharing, and Monique, if you want to jump in.
All right, let me get some technology shifting here. Jennifer, thank you for a great introduction. I'm really thankful to Jennifer and Marcelline for pulling this collection together. I'm a sociologist, and because we study society as sociologists, we get to range in the topics we explore and the people we work with. So my arrival at a film project is by way of some explorations I've been doing about race identity in America in a supposedly post-racial moment that the United States, I think starting in the early 2005, 10, imagined itself to be. Obviously, we've come a little bit of distance away from that, but this is how I got to a project on film. I also just want to say thank you to the American Paris Club. I think with all of the isolation we've all been living with and a lot of the upheaval, unrest around the collapsing economies, re-examination of race, it's really nice to connect with people just to be able to talk. And to talk about ideas and also fun and whimsical things that we share in our cultures. So my presentation today is a little bit excerpted from the chapter that will appear in the book. I touch on a number of the themes that Jennifer and Marcelline have mentioned here: the psychology of society, the play and self-reflexivity in the works, the distinctive, surreal, and dreamlike character, the aspects of personal community and memory. These are all themes that come up in the way that I've looked at this film, The Block Party of Dave Chappelle. And I think somebody in the gathering, someone in the audience said that, you know, one sensation you have in viewing the films of Gondry is that he helps you rethink the mind. And I want to stick with that as I walk through the slides in the presentation that I have for today. So my remarks are, as I said, drawn from the chapter, and basically they're comments on what I call a real and a surreal collaboration of Michel Gondry and Dave Chappelle. So this is slide 1. This is the broken angel. A street sign on the left shot of a house puts us in a neighborhood, Brooklyn in New York, and locates us at Quincy Street. The shot on the right is the tower at the top of the broken angel, And it's a crazy, crazy house constructed of many levels and parts and staircases and windows and mirrors. And it's the backdrop to the concert that's at the center of Block Party. And though the concert takes place outside, the house is a space that we will be both inside and outside for reasons that I'll go into later. But it kind of, for me, sets up this theme of interiority and exteriority. This is our director, far left, Michel Gondry, staging a scene that will be put in place, supposedly on this street in Brooklyn. You can see the street sign for Quincy. So the concert will take place at Quincy and Downing. So you've seen Downing Street where the Broken Angel is. Here's our director with his crew, people milling about in an empty space. And this is where the staging is going to happen. And the concert takes place at a very precise moment, 2 p.m. on a Saturday, in a very specific place, Quincy and Downing Streets in the Bed-Stuy neighborhood of Brooklyn. But we only arrive at the concert in the end by moving back and forth and shifting time and space between Ohio and New York repeatedly. This is Gondry's collaborator, Dave Chappelle. This is Dave in Ohio, where he was born, and where the film also takes place, when it's not in New York, and sometimes even when it is. With its nonlinear structure, the film allows us to take behind-the-scenes glimpses of Dave also at work, building a community and what I would say, constructing race. You notice that Dave has a megaphone. Dave reaches a lot of people with his comedy and by extension, his celebrity. But sometimes this can be too much for Dave, the megaphone, the celebrity. Dave has issues. He's a wildly popular comedian known for envelope-pushing sketches. His comedy work on race can be edgy, probing, insightful. There are criticisms about Dave, but that's for another talk. Here's a story about Dave. Dave believes in keeping it real. That's an ethos in the hip-hop community where you stay true to yourself. You're authentic where race matters. You're committed, you're connected, you never sell out. That's keeping it real. During a third season of a popular comedy sketch show Dave had on Comedy Central Network, Dave started to question his work. He had early on sparked controversy with sketches about race, politics, the identity of race, and he was always kind of skirting the edge of controversy and provocativeness. Over time, even Dave says that the sketches started to make him wonder if he was being socially irresponsible. There was a particular sketch that disturbed Dave deeply. He had imagined this production where he would play a pixie, an elf, who appeared in blackface. And even at the time, Dave described blackface as being a visual personification of the N-word, as in very taboo, third rail of race politics. Do you want to go there or not? Dave says in an interview that we see later, I'm on the set and we're taping the Pixie sketch and there's somebody white on the crew who's laughing. And I know the difference of people laughing with me and people laughing at me. And it was the first time, Dave says, that he had gotten a laugh that made him really uncomfortable. After this episode, Dave really started to think about what's the message that he's delivering to people, especially about race. This concerned me. I don't want Black people to be disappointed in me for putting that message out there, and it really raised a moral dilemma. As an aside, the idea of keeping it real was a recurring sketch on Dave's comedy show. He had a sketch called When Keeping It Real Goes Wrong that played out troubling aspects of Blackness that can spin out of your control when you're in integrated settings, especially in the workplace. These confessions on the couch of Oprah Winfrey came when Dave had returned from a mystery hiatus that stunned the world of comedy. Dave had basically walked away from a $50 million contract to renew his show. And at the time, there were rumors about drugs, criminality, and mental illness. Like I said, Dave has issues. So maybe he talks to his shrink, maybe he confides in his mother, maybe he cries on the shoulder of his best friend, but he also turned to Michel Gondry. Why? The simple answer from Dave is, I wanted to make the block party that I'd always want to attend. I think there's something more to see here. I would argue that the block party as a movie and as a collaboration between Gondry and Chappelle functions as a staged intervention to confront what I'm going to call Dave's existential racial angst. Now, if you ever even want to begin to untangle and grapple with and dig into the thing that is race in America, you should know one concept from W.E.B. Du Bois, philosopher, historian, 1903, Souls of Black Folk. Du Bois introduces the concept of double consciousness. I'll just read a short bit out of what I have here on the slide. This double consciousness is a peculiar sensation. It's a sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others. One ever feels his two-ness. Recent scholarship has added to this concept a triple consciousness. That is, you add an intersectionality of other identities, say gender, ethnicity, sexuality, ... I've written elsewhere about a double consciousness. That is a self-consciousness that Blacks have about how other Blacks view them. The double consciousness is complicated, complicating a binary of Black and white by layering in class, gender, ethnicity, sexuality, ... As you can see, it's a lot to wrestle with, and money and celebrity don't make that go away. So again, why the collaboration with Gondry? Let's take a little detour. Here, the shot you're looking at is that tower at the top of the Broken Angel house, tower. And the bottom shot is Jim Carrey from Spotless Mind, Eternal Sunshine of Spotless Mind. And as both Jennifer and Marcelline point out, in the films, you can't view or read one film without seeing echoes from a lot of the work, the commercials, the music videos, but also the movies. And so it's impossible not to kind of jump back and forth. Even where movies come later or earlier, you can always hear these reverbs and echoes in the work of Gondry. So a little bit of a detour over to Spotless Mind. If you've seen the movie, you'll remember this when you give it a viewing, which you absolutely should. Just pay attention. The movie is introducing a procedure of erasing memories. So Joel, who's the guy we're looking at here, the protagonist, learns that Clementine, who he thought was the love of his life, has undergone a process to erase her memory of Joel completely. It's like a breakup on steroids. So Joel decides to do the same thing. And there's a scene in the movie where before Joel arrives at the outfit that's going to do this memory erasure, he comes racing out of his apartment, zigzagging across a busy street full of traffic, and he's got two big garbage bags in both hands. And he brings the garbage bags into the office of Lacuna and drops them down, and he sits himself in a seat that's like a cross between a sort of old school beauty salon hair dryer and a dentist office chair that's got the metal tray for all the dental tools in front of him. And it's a little bit like an MRI. And out of this garbage bag, which is filled with memories of Clementine, everything that was in his apartment, his life that might remind him of Clementine, he's stuffed into the bag, and they show him these things. And we're watching a brain scan where there's a laser-like focus pointing at where in his memory does a mug, a picture, a trip to the park, an ice skating moment, snuggling on the couch. We get to see in the brain where all these memories are lodged. So the point for Eternal Sunshine is rooting out and erasing these memories. That's what produces the spotless mind. I think if you completely flip that, it's what Gondry is doing for Chappelle. He's not erasing and producing a spotless mind. He's implanting the brain with a memory, and it's not just a Dave Chappelle memory. It's individual memories that Dave has, but it's also collective memory of the African-American community. And I think that part of what's magical for me about the two of them collaborating is that you're not just getting the individual memory and the community memory, but because you've got the outsider looking into this community, it's accessible to everyone, okay? So what I see is, to go back to the Broken Angel, a great visual shaggy dog. This house is just the backdrop to the concert. It really has no purpose other than to be a kind of funky looking background to the concert. And yet we spend a lot of time inside the house. Gondry takes us with his camera up, up, up. There's staircases and there's these little nooks and crannies, and you're watching things upside down. You're going this way and then suddenly you're that way and you hear voices, and then you cut to other scenes that are out on the street, and then you leave New York and you're in Ohio, and yet you keep going in this corkscrew swirl through these winding stairs to the top of the house where you can see all of Brooklyn out beneath. What's the point of this? It's very disorienting. I think that's the point. I think that in order to mine the subconsciousness of Dave Chappelle, his community, the Black community, you need to feel dizzy. You need to be disoriented. Dave is in search of ideas. They're elusive: solidarity, belonging, community identity. So here's shots of the concert. In the end, it really is a block party. It's a concert. You're in these shots that I grabbed, you're on one side of the stage or the other. It's about performers and audience. It's that simple. Now, if I could use that special effect on PPT, which I didn't program in, if you blew up these pictures and made them move and shift, that's the way the movie goes. Sometimes you're at the concert, sometimes you leave. Sometimes you see a song all the way through, sometimes you just get a snippet of it. Some of the songs and the performances come at you, you see the end, and then later you see the beginning. It's really crazy, but there's depth behind each of these images. And typically, as a Gondry work, they don't really unfold as a linear experience. I think that what the two collaborators here are doing is bridging a reality and a surreality. They're constructing a virtual community that's hybrid and it's hyper-real. Behind the scenes and between the songs, betwixt the lyrics, there's a whole nother thing going on here. It's like Dave is shaking out these giant garbage bags of memory and experience and identity, and the documentarian in Gondry is pulling it all together. So when we shake out the garbage bag, if you view the film or you're giving it a review, here are some of the things that come out. A Black African-American University marching band, Ohio, where Dave grew up, a neighborhood community center, basketball court, we're shooting hoops. Erica Padu, you can actually see the picture there. She's wearing this big afro. It turns out it's just a wig. It blows away at one point in the wind, and then it's back again. Conjures Angela Davis. There's mention of iconographic figures, Mumia Abu-Jamal, Tupac Shakur, Biggie Smalls. There's political messages on t-shirts, on logos, on sneakers. There's Black Power Fist. There's an entire call and response stretch that's about police brutality. There is a lot of performativity that's brought to us about the meaning of race and pulling race together as a collective. There's a point midway through the film where Mos Def, one of the musicians who's also in Be Kind, Rewind, shares his memories and his feelings, fondness for Bed-Stuy, the community that we're in. He says, it's better now than it has been in a long time. And the camera pans and we see a garbage dumpster, a figure just kind of crumpled up, decrepit in a door frame, the shoelaces of a pair of sneakers strung over a telephone wire. And we've been brought here to the concert, but there's a dislocation and a disorientation, and at the same time belonging. We feel the impact of poverty and the creep of gentrification. Scholar C. Riley Snorton sees the significance of the documentary in its role as, quote, a semi-ethnographic evidence of urban life, Black political thought, and cultural expression. But I would say ethnography actually takes place in real places. The collaboration between Gondry and Chappelle allows us, though, to consider race as a surreal and a hyperreal, not simply ethnographic reality.
Can I just say thank you so much, Monique, for presenting your work from the book and giving me a bit more context to it as well. That was really enjoyable for me, despite the fact that I've read the chapter. It was really interesting to get to see that in that form. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and Monique, I think it was so timely in this moment of Black Lives Matter, where we're coming to some reckonings with things. Putting this all in context was extremely helpful. Thank you all. Does anyone have any questions? Just raise your hand if you do. Does anyone have questions?
I just want to say congratulations. Looking forward to reading the book.
Oh, thank you so much. We actually have a 30% off. So if anybody's interested, I can send the 30% off coupon or discount code for those of you who are interested. We're so grateful to you, and we want to thank Monique Taylor so much for your absolutely wonderful, just amazing presentation. It was just so enlightening, and it was just we're so grateful to everyone for listening to us.
And we're really excited actually for everyone to read all of our contributors, because yeah, we've got a wonderful, we think a wonderful range of work in the book. So we're very proud of all the contributors that we've worked with, and can't wait for everyone to kind of see it together as a collection.
We're looking forward to it, and thank you all, Monique, Jennifer, and of course Marcelline, who's been very faithful with the Paris American Club, and all of you who have attended. So we wish you a bonne soirée, and look forward to seeing you in the next Mardi Apéro in 2 weeks. Thank you all.
Merci
Good night.
beaucoup.
Bonsoir.
Thank you. Bonsoir.